Glacier Bay National Park and Preserve is a collection of over 3 million acres in the southeast coastal region of Alaska. It is primarily visited by people who take an Alaskan cruise, with most visitors only seeing it from the deck of a cruise ship. We set out to visit Glacier Bay from Anchorage and flew into the tiny town of Gustavus for 2 days of exploring. Here's all the information on what it's like to visit Glacier Bay National Park, and you can see the rest of our Alaska National Park videos in the description. Let's jump into it. Arrived to a rainy morning in Anchorage Airport, and we are heading out to Glacier Bay National Park. Pops' very effective suitcase. 2 flights today, heading to Juneau and then to Glacier Bay. I know this isn't applicable for a lot of people, but if you leave from Anchorage, be sure to get a window seat on the right side of the plane. The views are just incredible. We had a 3-hour layover in Juneau, and the airport is tiny, and so we left and walked over to Donna's restaurant, which was about 10 minutes away, to get lunch. After that, I was back to the airport and off to Gustavus.
Here we go, Glacier Bay. It's going to be gorgeous, sunshiny day. Here we go.
I think this may be the shortest flight I've ever been on, and it's about 20 minutes. Again, get the window seat. When we arrived, it was the smallest airport I'd ever been to as well, and we grabbed our bags, got on the bus, and headed towards our hotel. We found the shuttle for the lodge. It's a big bus. The bus ride just takes you through the small town, but luckily the people who were driving it were awesome and told us a lot about the lodge and the national park. Officially arrived at Glacier Bay.
Happy to be here.
Room number 9.
And it gives you a map of how to get there.
Here is our room. The best part is look at where we're at. Look at this view we have out our window. Wow. What do you think, Pops?
That's pretty awesome. Mountains in the background. Wow, gorgeous. And they even left us a little note. It says, "We're so happy you're here, Pops. Too bad, Josh." No, that's not what it says. It says, "Welcome to Glacier Bay. We wish you a pleasant vacation in Alaska and in one of our favorite rooms."
So in case you're waiting to come here, this is a long day. We left Anchorage at 9:30 and it is 5 p.m. now. We got 2 days to explore this beautiful park. Both my dad and I were really impressed with this lodge, as it feels like it blended in with the surrounding area and felt very natural while we were here. Since we had been cooped up all day, we set out to explore a little bit. Our first stop was to head over to the main lodge and go to the visitor center and to get a reservation for dinner. Also, there's no reception, so if you want to communicate with anyone, you have to go to the lodge and use their Wi-Fi. The upstairs of the lodge is where the visitor center is, with information on the park and a ranger you can ask questions to. Just putting this out there. Hopefully this is what we're going to see tomorrow on our cruise. Yeah?
Absolutely, I'm very confident.
Very confident they're going to breach for us.
That's a whale.
Yeah. So this is how big Glacier Bay is, and we are just right here, and the only part we're going on the boat is this middle part, but you can see how massive the national park is. Even though it was pretty small, it was still a great visitor center, and I have to say the rangers I interacted with there were some of the most helpful I've ever talked to. Downstairs in the lodge, you'll also find a store and the restaurant, and you basically have to bring your own food or eat here, as there's nothing else around. Since we still had a lot of daylight left and it wasn't time for dinner, we decided to head out on the trail and just walk around and see what we could find. This whale was named Snow. It was 44 years old, length 45 feet, 35 tons in weight, and it was actually hit by a cruise ship, which is sad. And then it was left to decay and decompose on the beach for 15 months. And then the bones were repaired and cleaned, and here is Snow today.
It said here that Snow was seen as far away as Hawaii when alive.
We talked to the ranger and they said the tide is low and it's a good time to head out on this little trail. So we're gonna walk out, see if we can see anything in the tide pools. This is a great time to show you that that's the lodge, and then this is our room right there. About as good as it gets. There goes Pop's Tide Pool Explorer Extraordinaire. This part of the park doesn't get a lot of visitors, so we were basically by ourselves when we were walking on the trails. We didn't really know where to go, so we just headed down to the water and then walked along the water's edge. Tide is definitely low and I see lots of barnacles and stuff, but not really anything else. Pop says he found his starfish. There he is, we found our first sea star. Way to go, Pops, you found a second one for us. As we rounded the bend to where the river met the ocean, this is where we saw almost all of the sea life. What I didn't even notice while I was taking a picture of these sea stars, starfish, whatever they are, is look at all of these urchins. They're everywhere. All right, I guess we can stop counting because there's another one. Look at them all stretched out perfectly. And then there's another one right there. So basically they're everywhere. I've never actually seen one move before. That is cool. Moves about as fast as Pops does on a hike. We explored for another 15 minutes and saw another 15 or 20 sea stars, plus thousands of urchins. Well, I would call that a success. Definitely come down here at low tide. You'll probably see some cool stuff. On all of the trails, we're seeing these beautiful reflective berries, but the ranger told us if you eat those, you will have cardiac arrest. So do not eat them. I've already had to smack Pop's hand twice because there's another berry that you're supposedly allowed to eat. I want you alive for the rest of this trip.
Just for the rest of the trip?
Yeah, then you're good.
It's called a salmon berry, and I guess it looks like a raspberry. Very different than beef.
On the way back, there's an impressive house dedicated to the First Nations people who lived in the Glacier Bay area. They have a nightly program at around 7 p.m., but unfortunately there wasn't anyone to lead it when we were there. Luckily, the rangers still opened it up for people to see, and I'll leave a link to a lot more information about this house in the description if you want to read more. For us, all that was left was to head back to the lodge for our dinner reservation to end the day. Pops went with the fish and chips, and I went with the flatbread. Ending our day beside the fire, reading and looking out at the view. That's it for today. Tomorrow we are taking the boat to explore Glacier Bay. For our only full day in Glacier Bay, we booked an 8-hour boat tour. Luckily, they start breakfast early, so we were able to get the breakfast buffet before heading out on the boat. 6:45 right now, and today we're heading out on the main thing that you do in Glacier Bay, and that is to take the 8-hour boat tour. Hopefully we see some calving glaciers and lots of wildlife. See how this goes. Also, it's pretty much the perfect morning. I couldn't ask for anything better. The water is flat, it's sunny. It's gonna be a nice day out there. The boat leaves from the Bartlett Cove dock, and it only takes about 5 minutes to walk down there from the Glacier Bay Lodge. Depending on when you're going, you can do this as a day trip as well, so look into that if you don't want to spend the night. There's the range that you could see out there, but it's a little bit hazy from a fire, so we can't really see anything. And there's the boat that we're setting out on today. I'm pretty excited. After going to the one in Kenai Fjords, I think this is going to be a pretty awesome trip. The boat was actually smaller than I anticipated, but it was only about 75% capacity, so it was pretty easy to move around the boat and to find a spot to sit inside if you wanted to. Here we go, our journey begins now. You guys know me, I didn't sit inside until we were coming back on the tour later in the day. After going on the one in Kenai Fjords, I didn't realize how cold it can be when you're out on the boat. So this time I was very prepared with multiple layers and even gloves, and I highly recommend you bring something like that if you're going on a tour like this. Even on a nice sunny day like we had, it can still be incredibly cold, especially with the wind and in the early morning. The first hour and a half or so was relatively calm as we made our way out of Bartlett Cove and past Strawberry Island. During this section, the water was calm and we were just on the lookout for wildlife, but we didn't really see much of anything. The first major point of interest on our tour was South Marble Island. This island is an incredibly popular spot for both stellar sea lions and many different species of seabirds. We saw many stellar sea lions on the rock in front of the island, and the males can weigh up to 2,000 pounds. We were also lucky enough to see a half dozen or so sea otters that were just swimming and relaxing in the calm waters. South Marble Island has been a place that seabirds flock to for decades. It's also a place where they're often studied, especially because multiple species live here since it's safe from predators and has lots of opportunity for food. I'm not much of a birder, so I don't really know what I was looking at other than the puffins, which are one of my favorite animals. But hopefully you see a lot of birds if that's something that you're into when you come here. We spent a good 20 minutes just hanging out here before we continued on and went past North Marble Island. This one doesn't have the sea lions or the birds though. As we were leaving the islands, we saw a whale breach out in the distance and informed the captain, but he said that they don't stop at all for whales, so we could only see what we could see while we were going. It was a bummer because it kept breaching over and over again, but at least we got to see it from far away, which is better than nothing. As the tour continued, the views just kept getting better and better as we headed back into Glacier Bay. Even with the smoke from the fire, you could still get some great views of the massive mountains that were on both sides of you. Plus, we were constantly on the lookout for wildlife, and our captain stopped and pointed it out whenever he saw something. In one section, we saw a bald eagle sitting on the cliff, and in another section, we saw about a dozen mountain goats all over. And lastly, we actually got to see a bear sitting on the beach as well, which is something I definitely did not expect. Basically, the whole tour was just loaded with wildlife as we saw more puffins, more mountain goats, and more seals. The entire tour was narrated by a ranger guide who had to have been one of the most knowledgeable people about the Glacier Bay area that they had on staff. He was absolutely incredible and took the time to walk around and answer your questions and to set up different things downstairs for you to touch and to look at that told you more about the Glacier Bay area. Our goal for the day was to make it all the way back to the Margerie Glacier, which is about 4 hours from where we started. There are two major inlets in Glacier Bay, the one that we're going on in this video, and then another one which is only accessible via kayak. I have to imagine if you're a kayaker, that's probably one of the most beautiful places you can go in the entire world. As we got closer to the central glacier, the views kept getting better with massive rocky mountains and glaciers on both sides of us, plus waterfalls and some cruise ships that we came up to. The anticipation was building as we started passing icebergs and everybody started to make their way up to the top. There's 6 or 7 major glaciers up here, but we only saw 2 of the main ones on our trip. You can see other ones out in the distance though. Once we rounded the final bend, the glacier came into view in the distance. It's almost impossible to get any sense of scale with how big this glacier is, but the ranger told us that it's about a half mile across. Once we arrived, the boat sat for about 30 minutes so we could watch and hope to see the glacier calving. There was a lot of activity in the beginning, so everybody was pretty excited about the possibility. As we were sitting there watching, I was able to check off something I've always wanted to see on my bucket list.
Wow. Gosh.
Yeah, I know, it doesn't sound like I'm very excited, but I was speechless. This is one of the coolest things I've ever seen in my entire life. Plus, look at that wave that's coming off of it. And remember that we're incredibly far away and this is a half mile across. I couldn't believe that I was actually able to capture that, and I just left my camera running for the entire rest of the time that we were at the glacier just in case we saw it again. That 10 seconds though was worth the entire trip for me, and I was on cloud 9 coming back from that. As we said goodbye to the glacier, we gave our spot to a cruise ship and started the long ride back.
Lunchtime.
Lunch was great. You got a drink, a sandwich, and either chips or cookies.
Nice little lunch here.
On the way back, the boat's going as fast as it can and it doesn't really stop for any wildlife or views. You can take the opportunity to watch the beautiful scenery pass, talk to the ranger, or even take a nap.
Towards the end of the boat ride, they let you do watercolor with actual glacier water. Have you ever done that before, Pops?
We'll see whether what I do is worth the darn.
Look at Picasso over here. It's a glacier.
South Marble Island.
Clearly it's South Marble Island.
Put this up here and sell it for $10, right?
Yeah.
What do you think?
Not bad. I like the reflection.
It's not great.
There's not a lot of puffins in that shot.
They're in there, they're hidden though.
Yeah.
This was a really fun thing they let everybody do, and a bunch of people did paintings. After that, we just relaxed and soaked in the views as we made our way all the way back to Bartlett Cove.
We survived.
We survived. That was incredibly beautiful, fun, wonderful experience. That was really cool.
I agree. I got to see Glacier Calving, which is something I have always wanted to do and lived up to expectations. Also, shout out to Ranger Mike, who was incredibly awesome. We're back with some time to kill before dinner, so we're gonna do the Forest Trail Loop, which is only 1 mile long.
So we're currently heading out on the beach trail, and then we're gonna connect with the forest trail and take that back to the lodge.
This trail is about 1 mile round trip and it heads out to the campground and then loops back to the lodge. They also have daily ranger-led hikes on this trail if you're interested as well.
Something that I didn't know when I booked this is that you can actually take the boat and then you can take the bus back to the airport. So we could have actually left today, but we're leaving tomorrow at 5, which means we have a lot more time than we probably need here, but it'll be cool to relax and explore the area a little bit more.
One of the things we learned on the boat was about how this glacier had a surge and actually filled in the entire area that we were boating today 250 years ago during the Little Ice Age. It actually went all the way back in the last 250 years, which is why you have to go so far to see it now, but it used to be right out there. If you wanted to camp here, here is what the campground looks like. It looks pretty beautiful. The beach is right on the other side.
Basically half of that campground is empty and it's the summertime. I can't even believe that, and someone told me that the cost is free or very little, so that's a pretty cool way to do it, and it's not very far from the lodge.
From the campground, you leave the beach trail and loop back on the forest trail towards the lodge.
It's interesting how everything is covered with moss, from this rock to the ground to all of the logs back there. It's all covered in moss.
This is a nice, easy trail, and we didn't see any other people on it at all when we were there.
About halfway through is this beautiful pond. Dragonflies all over, logs in the middle, these leaves. It's really pretty.
This section of the trail goes past a few small ponds before getting to a larger pond where there are often moose sightings.
This part of the trail that we got to is stunning. It has an elevated boardwalk and then it leads to this view of this awesome pond.
It's called the Blackwater Pond.
And I think Pops is just gonna stay here the rest of the day.
All right, I'll catch you back in LA or something.
One of the things that really hit me about the Bartlett Cove section of Glacier Bay is just how relaxing the area is. The trails here are short without a lot of elevation gain, and they don't lead to crazy views, but they do lead to very peaceful places where you can observe nature and just enjoy the surroundings.
Just wanted to point out that this part of the trail to the 2 pond overlooks is wheelchair accessible, and it's just stunning with all of these trees and everything. So this is definitely one of the better wheelchair trails we've been on.
One note on wheelchair accessibility though, I'm not really sure how accessible the lodge is. You definitely want to check with them before you book something.
All right, we finished the forest loop. Pops and I both give this trail 2 thumbs up. It's beautiful, short, lots of great views. We're heading to the lodge to get some dinner.
This is a pretty epic spot for dinner. Pops went with the traditional burger, and I went with the Alaskan caught halibut.
Gotta get halibut.
It's pretty pricey for dinner, but it's not bad, and there's no other options around, so you eat there, you bring your own food. That's it for today. We'll see you tomorrow to finish our time in Glacier Bay. Good morning. I'm heading out on the 5-mile river trail. Pop's knee is bothering him, so he's gonna stay at the cabin. But let's see how this is. Got some time to kill before the airplane anyway.
There aren't very many established trails in this area, so this was one of the only remaining I had left.
This isn't a trail that a lot of people do, so that's why I wanted to make sure I had bear spray for it, just in case. I don't know if you can see, but that's a porcupine. Porcupine are all over the park.
They told us to always be on a lookout for them as they're all over, but this was the first sighting that we had.
This is supposed to be a relatively flat trail with the possibility of wildlife, so just for a reminder, there's a moose. Try to stay out of its way. Get behind a tree between you and the moose. And then with bears, you basically just want to be talking on the trail so you don't startle the bear and they know you're coming. If you see them, you don't want to run. You want to stand your ground, talk to them. Hopefully they'll just move along, and then you obviously have bear spray as last resort, but most of the time it's not going to come to having to use that at all.
This is another beautiful trail with a lot of moss like what we saw the previous day on the forest trail.
So we're about a half mile in from the trailhead and then another mile to Bartlett River. This is also the split for Bartlett Lake, but that's like a 10-mile round trip trail. This is definitely one of those trails where you gotta look down and watch where you're walking. Lots of roots and rocks everywhere. Wow, look at this beautiful down tree right along the trail. So cool.
The best thing about this trail is just the solitude that you get while you're on it. It was almost silent the entire time I was on it, other than the sound of water and the sound of my feet on the trail. You don't get that very often, especially not in a national park.
We still got about a half mile to go, but this is our first view of the river right here.
It's kind of a bummer that this trail is in the forest the whole time. It'd be nice to walk along this river. It's beautiful.
As you exit the forest, this is definitely the best part of the trail. Here you walk on an elevated boardwalk along the river, and I'm sure during certain times of the year you can get some great animal sightings here. Unfortunately for us, it was really muddy and the water level was pretty low, so it wasn't a great time to be there.
According to all trails, it looks like it goes maybe just a little bit further, but the trail is super muddy and overgrown, so I think we're calling this the end. Plus there's not a ton of water at the moment, tide's really low. Still an incredibly beautiful area though, worth coming out to if you had the time like we did.
After soaking in the views for a little bit longer, we started the 2.5-mile walk back.
Made it back to the trailhead. That's a great trail for solitude. I only saw one other person the entire time I was there. Also, it looks like this during some time of the year, which would make it even better. If you come at the same time that I came, it's probably not worth doing unless you want a way to be active. But we have 5 more hours left before we can get on the shuttle and go back to the airport. So I'm gonna clean up, have some lunch, just hang out, and then we're gonna head out.
This is another reason why people do this as a day trip. There's only one flight in and one flight out per day, so you have to wait.
This is a pretty epic place to waste some time. Nice work environment, there's some coffee, and then look at that view.
I'm not complaining though. Other than the mosquitoes that were trying to get me, it was pretty nice to have this time to just decompress and to think about the awesome trip we had to Glacier Bay.
Here we go, staying back at the lodge, getting on the bus and heading back to the airport.
The bus left about an hour and a half before our flight, and it took us the 15 minutes through town to the airport. The funniest part about all of this is that the airport's not even open until about 45 minutes before the flight. Basically, you just sit outside and wait for the one plane to come in, and then for you to be able to check in and get back on the plane to go to Juneau.
That's it for our time in Glacier Bay. Hopefully you enjoyed it. We'll see you on the next one.